Best ever listeners, welcome to the Best Ever CRE podcast. I am your host, Joe Cornwell, and today I am joined by Katie Kim. Katie is the CEO and founder of the Developers Developer. She is also a multifamily and mixed-use developer. They are doing projects in Texas and Nevada. Katie, I believe it's your first time on the show.
It
So
is.
welcome. How are you today?
It is. Thank you very much. I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here.
We appreciate you giving us your time today. So since it's your first time on the show, give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, and then how'd you get into real estate?
Yeah, so I grew up in a construction real estate development family. So I often say I was a victim of child labor law. When people would be having fun on Saturday, we'd be going to soccer practice and then doing fix and flips. And that was our bonding time, our family bonding time. So I actually took a detour in tech and consulting and thought I'd never want to be part of the family business, and came back around to it. I got the opportunity to manage our construction company and decided that my passion lay more in the development side. And so really leaned in to development, and then launched my own company in 2015, offering a developer for fee, helping other people put together developments.
Gotcha. And I think I lost you for just a second there. But what was your first kind of experience into the real estate business? You know, your actual active, like, got your hands in the mix of a deal.
So besides going to like open houses and stuff and zoning meetings with my mom as a kid, my first experience into the development side was really, when was that? Probably back in 2012, when we were working with a national restaurant tenant, and they were basically saying, we want to be in these locations, but we can't find anything. So we did a build to lease for them. And after that, I was really hooked with doing the process. I was like, okay, great. So I can put together these developments, do a multi-tenant. So we did more than just that one tenant, but that was their anchor. And then the anchor tenant covered the mortgage, and then everybody else was profit. And so really we started designing that. And then you get hooked on the development side of like, so I could do this, I can do that. It's almost like coloring outside the lines, but on the same page, right? You have the legal confinements of the deal and what we can do, but really anything you can structure legally and make it profitable for in a win-win is game on.
What market was that first deal in?
So that was in the Midwest. That was in a town called Peoria, Illinois.
Okay. Illinois. I got it. Yeah. And, you know, I love that concept. It's something that we've looked at a lot. I have a business partner in my construction business, and we've looked at, okay, how do we build ground up our dream shop, right? Our dream, you know, kind of like home base headquarters for our business. Because right now we kind of have garages scattered all over the city, and, you know, it's a lot of back and forth. You know, where's this equipment at? Where's this tool at? You know, it's like we have this, it's hard to run this business as we've scaled without having that really central hub. But to your point with that example, we're looking at how do we build out what we want for us, but then add all these multi-tenant options where, you know, at worst case, we can at least basically, you know, use our building for free. Right. And so I love that. It's almost like house hacking on a large commercial development. And I love that idea.
Yeah. And that's a great way to go into the project, because we've done that multiple times. I mean, especially in our construction company, the build to suit is really bread and butter, because we would go in and we did projects for like Dover Elevator and Widmer Furniture, where we would build a building and buy the land behind them and create these phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 expansion. And with the main building, we would lease out the tenant spaces until they were ready to expand. So then they slowly stepped into it. And then we put another layer on, not to confuse it, but if we were doing it for our clients and they wanted us to own the building, a lot of times they would want a lease with an option to buy. So we would do a build to suit and a lease with an option to buy on top of it. So it was a great collaboration of what the client needed and wanted, and what the investor group and our construction company needed and wanted.
So how are you finding these people? That's, you know, that seems like an interesting aspect to this. It's like, how are these people finding you? How are you finding them? Like, how, you know, what does that process look like?
Yes. So we had a real estate arm. So we had real estate, construction, development, and then property management. And that's all the suite of services we have still today. And a lot of times the the real estate side would bring us the lead of like the client can't find what they're looking for, or
Mm,
they're expanding at such a high rate they don't even know what they need, but
right.
they need
Okay.
that flexibility to grow and go, and nobody can really offer that to them because a lot of times, and I am a real estate broker, we take orders from clients, we don't ask questions and seek to understand. And so a lot of times their businesses coming to us saying we're frustrated, we can't find what we need in the space, and or it's other real estate agents that we work collaboratively with saying, hey, can you guys create something for them? And we work hand in hand with other real estate agents for sure, and that is a way that we get those people coming in. And some of it is honestly leveraging sporting events. There was a lot of times where my dad would say, yeah, we met this guy at your soccer game because his kid
Mm.
was playing and we were talking about, and it's those organic conversations that really come into play when you're out in the community and in the game.
Yeah, that's great. And that's I'm trying to like I have my wheel spinning here of what does this look like from a functional standpoint. So let's do like a hypothetical. Let's say
Yeah.
we're going to hire you, and I'm in Cincinnati market, and I'm like, hey, I have this construction company. We're growing. We got 20 employees. We got 10 trucks. We've outgrown all our spaces. We're sick of renting. We really want to have someone like you build us something that exactly what we need.
Mhm.
So from that onset of that first conversation, what does that whole process look like? Like, walk me through a kind of a streamlined example.
Yeah. So first we'd have really an engagement meeting where it's okay, you're telling us you need an office, you need a yard, you need some
Mm.
trucks, it's probably storage overnight
Yep.
capability, maybe equipment. We'd really do
Yep.
that due diligence and dig in and seek to figure out what are all the aspects of your company, and then
Hmm.
what's your 3 to 5 year plan, and
Okay.
then really drill you on where does that look like you're going, and then look at that from a revenue standpoint, because I also want to make sure that those projections are bankable when we go to
Right.
the bank, because that's
Right.
got to be part of the play, is saying your growth is realistic. And so then looking
Mm.
at that, and then also having that X factor, that if you all of a sudden hit a stride and you 10x, what does that look like? And then looking at, where in the city does it make best use to have you, more than likely by interstates and easy access and industrial parks, something like that. Then we go to look at like, what is the land available? What are the buildings available? Is there something we can, like you said, house hack, building hack, where it's this old building, we can renovate it, and then step
Mm.
into what can the business afford from that rent structure, right? And that's why we dig into the business first. And then what does the construction, cost look like in that whole rent structure? So we kind of balance both of it. And then especially if you're a business and you're adding jobs and potentially other revenue sources to the city and the county, we look at economic incentives very heavily to
Mm.
help bridge that gap, because
Yeah.
a lot of times businesses have to expand before they're ready to do so, which also means that the finances aren't there yet. So in essence, when we put together that offering, and you have a development company, you have a construction company, so even to say like, hey, why don't we structure it like this or like that, or here's, do you want to put this as equity into the deal versus take it as a fee, so we look at all those opportunities of how to structure the deal properly, even looking at, do you give your investors more depreciation? Like, we look at everything in that and really pour into those economic incentives, because that's what they're there for. And a
Yeah.
lot of times smaller projects or smaller businesses think like, oh, I can't qualify for them and I don't know how to step into them. The sad part is that's exactly why they created those programs, that, and without them knowing those knowledge of how to use them, they don't get used. So a lot of times those economic incentive dollars are sitting on the sidelines because nobody's applying for them. And so
Gotcha.
that, I think, is a way to step into it. And then it's looking at kind of that back and forth of, what do you need as a business? What do the investors need? Are you coming in as equity? Are you, like, how does that all come together? And then we work with you to drive it to completion.
So it sounds like in this scenario, you're talking more of like a consulting role. Is there a situation where you and your company would actually do the development, or is that only very specific markets?
There would definitely be a part where we do that. A lot of,
Okay.
when we get engaged, a lot of times our owners and our clients want to own the real estate. They want to stay in the
Okay.
game.
Okay.
And
Got
so
it.
we don't take that, assumption. But if they come to us and say, like, one of the things we're doing in the Texas Triangle is a master lease program, where
Mm,
we are working with cities and municipalities on land they own. And we have these companies that want to locate near Samsung, and they're saying we need, a tilt up warehouse, boom, 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 boom. They give all the details, and we're like, okay, we'll build that for you. Here's the rent, and then here's a lease term, and we go and we do everything from beginning to end, help them design everything out, manage the construction, and then manage the property and the asset. So
yeah,
we've
because
got
I mean,
the
I would have to imagine, right, in our scenario we made up here,
Mhm.
if I am hiring you to do my development
Yes.
and my company, whatever, we have good, we look great on paper, we have great revenue, we have good profit, and I am then signing and guaranteeing a lease with you as
Mhm.
the developer slash initial building owner with maybe a lease option or whatever, as you mentioned. My assumption is when you take that to a bank to get this construction loan for the development, that's going to help a lot in
Mhm.
making the bank feel comfortable in loaning you, whatever it is, 80, 70, 65% of that development fee, because they already know, hey, we have a day one tenant who's going to be a lease option tenant, so they're going to obviously want to take care of it and have a long-term kind of roots in that property.
Yeah.
So I would imagine you've had scenarios like that went a long way when you already pre-lease something that isn't even it hasn't even you don't even own the dirt yet, maybe.
Absolutely. And like that's exactly what we did with Dover Elevator, which is now Dyson Krupp. They came to us, and it was actually it was a soccer game, and literally they were like, we want a place here, we can't find anything. So we bought the land, built the building, and we had three other expansions. And
Mm,
again, when you're going to the bank, we already had that lease day one.
gotcha.
And so now, you're already cash flowing as soon as you're done with construction and you're stabilizing. So that's definitely attractive. And ideally that's the best situation for developers, right? And I always encourage people, start marketing your spaces as soon as you have it controlled, right? Like why not try and lease
I
up?
love that. I love that.
So any of our development projects, we really bring people along for the experience of the construction as well as start to lease up day one.
Yeah. Let me touch on that for just a second. So, we've done I mentioned offline. We've done a couple of these redevelopments where it
Mm,
wasn't as existing structure, but we did a massive change of use, a full gut shell redevelopment. And as I mentioned to you, we're now actively working on that first actual ground up development that we own, not on a contract. And so one thing that we've had a lot of success with in this particular market that we're working in right now is people get really excited about these deals, and especially like we're in a kind of more dense metro area. We're in a suburb of Cincinnati, so like we're not very rural where some of this stuff might be more rural if you're doing like flex space and things like that. But these are more
yeah.
mixed use residential, right? Where as soon as the buzz goes around, like, hey, we're taking this old blighted building in a lot of cases, and we're going to make it pretty, and here's our renderings, and this is what's going to look like. People get really excited about that, and you can get a lot of momentum on, as you
Mm,
mentioned, pre-leasing those spaces literally just from renderings, and
yeah.
trying to, and it might be a year out, 18 months out, whatever it may be, but we've had success with pre-leasing residential and commercial spaces way in advance, which obviously is great when it comes to one, it gives you a timeline,
Hmm.
right? Like, oh, we got to deliver these by July 1st, 2027, or whatever the date is. And it's like, oh, and now we have a commercial tenant maybe in place that this is specifically what we need to do on our build out instead of just trying to white box it and then having to go back and move plumbing or whatever it may be. So, I love that's incredible advice.
Yeah, and I love to me, one of my passions is urban infill. Like I love to take those old buildings and
Yes.
just change the game with them, right? And
Yep.
reactivate them. And a lot of I mentioned doing a lot of public-private partnerships. One of the things that I love doing is going into a city and taking their old downtown, which I say it's usually like the Cars movie scenario, right? Like the interstate
Hmm.
went this way and the downtown, it's like a ring road now.
Yep.
But that's where a lot of the heartbeat of the city used to be. And so now what we can do is we have the opportunity to go in, reactivate those spaces, but it goes beyond the walls when you do that type of development. Like you have to activate from outside in.
Hmm.
And so looking at that, like you said, bringing people along with the experience, we did a public private partnership with the Park District in Illinois, and it's called Keller Station in Peoria. And we took the old Illinois Department of Transportation campus, and it'd been blighted. I mean, like, forest growing over the walls and everything like that since
Yep.
1996. and the park district didn't have any need for it. They came to us, what would you do? And so we turned it into this campus of, coffee shop, a bar, a couple restaurants, some micro suites,
That's
offices,
awesome.
retail. And coming along, having the community come along with that journey was great. My team, I remember one time goes, hey, before we start construction, do like a live video walking through the building. And I'm like, nobody wants to see that, guys. Like, nobody wants to see me
Hmm.
walking through a vacant building. I'm like, I'm the only one that gets excited about this. Okay. And I did. And we had over like 4,000 views in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Yeah.
wait a
People
second.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you bring them along for that transition and they feel part of it. And it
Hmm.
really helps bring a personality to those developments, because those type of developments, it's more than the building. It has to be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. I obviously I'm newer to this game.
Yeah.
But it is something that I've noticed right away. It's like, this isn't going in and flipping a house. This isn't going
Mm-mm.
in and just taking a vacant building and lease up, right? This is there's a very emotional
Mhm.
attachment to these developments, especially when you're talking about these old, like you use the analogy, like the old Main Street, right? That's
Yeah.
exactly where we're working. We are literally working in a suburb of Cincinnati that has this historical Main Street. It's
Mhm.
called the City of Reading for anyone who may be familiar with Cincinnati market, but it has a lot of history and there's a lot of emotion and a lot of politics, right? There's a lot
Yeah.
of that intertwining happening, and I'm sure you could tell a lot of stories about the politics involved in development. But it's one of those things where you have these kind of hard-nosed people that have been in the community. Their family maybe lived there 100, 150 years, and they're like, no, we don't want any change. We want this to stay 1950 and nothing change. And then you'll have the kind of newer generations are like, no, like we want to see this community thrive and really
Mhm.
modernize and have a new life brought into it, which obviously comes with development and capitalization and all these things. But it's a fine line. There's a
Oh.
lot of emotional attachment from all sides when it comes to trying to get these deals off the ground.
And Joe, you mentioned something about the younger generation saying they want this, and then you have the older
Mm,
generation. We deal with that all the time, and
yeah.
nobody wants change, right? Everybody wants the status quo. But when you look at the financial structure of some of these cities, but for us reigniting that downtown and making it come back to life, celebrating the history but yet enhancing it with some new uses,
Yeah.
they're going to die. And a lot of times those are the most expensive places in the city to maintain because the infrastructure is older and all that. So if you follow the money, a lot of times the city's going to incentivize you to do that. But the bigger game changer, like you mentioned, is that younger generation wants that community, right? They want
Yeah.
to go to the coffee shop, they want to walk around the square, they want to shop. But a lot of times those spaces are so vacant and blighted because again, they're going to the different ones. So it's looking at those opportunities beyond it and almost, well, we brand it. I think you have to brand it, you have to make it its own
Mm,
business and really market to that too. And I
yeah.
think if you can do that in your communities, it changes the game. Like,
Have a story to tell. That's kind of the way I've been looking at it.
yeah, and personify it, right? So if you have that story, maybe, I mean, you're dealing with an old theater, like,
Hmm.
to me, I'm like, do you have any ghosts? That's my first thing, like, because that could be like your curator for the experience and going crazy with it, and that type. But those things, you have that construction time frame to market the development. So again, it goes
Hmm.
back to now follow the money to the lease up. And if you do it right and you're already marketing, a lot of times our urban infill projects are leased up, if not at closing of the construction, within like 45 to 60 days because
That's
of
great.
how we led into it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and we yeah, we're really excited about that aspect of it. And I'm very fortunate. My business partner's wife is she has a design background, so we actually own another business across the street from this that they was her vision with full redevelopment of an existing structure, and she built the coffee shop. She built this kind of this kind of urban attraction that it was something that didn't exist in the neighborhood where you know to your point, it brought in a lot of new people, a lot of new faces to the community. And so we already have started, seeing some of that, which is obviously what helped give us confidence to do, a 4 times larger project across the street, and know that there is an appetite from within and from the surrounding neighborhoods to be a part of something exciting like that. But what I've noticed with that specific project I just mentioned is that you really do get that buy-in from the younger generation. People in their
Oh,
20s and their 30s and their 40s. And maybe it's not the historical generational families I mentioned earlier, where maybe they're in their 70s, 80s, and they have grandkids that are now in the community. Maybe they're a little more opposed to seeing that rapid progressive change. But I think the younger generation, my generation and younger, they want to see that new development.
yeah, and they can afford it in those areas, right? In the tertiary and the secondary markets, they can afford it. So, even for example, like in Austin, they want that walkability and that lifestyle, but a lot of them can't financially afford to live downtown. So now
Mm,
you see a lot of these communities in the suburbs, and this is, where we're having the conversations over and over again is how do we activate that downtown? How do we attract that young professional here, give them the services they need at affordable rates and opportunities? And that's where we're kind of looking at that
yes.
on the attraction side. How do you change the game? And affordability is on the top of everybody's mind right now, but that is where if you create those experiences, you're going to just pull from, from that core that you're near.
Yes. So I'm okay. So this is I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna preface almost like a prompt here of a problem I see in this, and I'll pick on Cincinnati because obviously I know that market the best. But this is common across the country, especially the older markets. I guess probably the more east you go, the more common you see this in the Midwest, things like that.
Mhm.
Okay, so the problem I see is you have these metros, right? Like Cincinnati, like Detroit, like Cleveland, Indianapolis, whatever. Right? You can pick on a lot of different cities that are very similar in that Midwest,
Mhm.
where you have that downtown center,
Yeah.
right? That was the hub of commerce and industry 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And as we've seen over the last 50 years, and obviously I don't really want to get political, but you can kind of track how the politics have changed the landscape of the American economy,
Yep.
with losing manufacturing, losing industry, things like that, where these bands of suburbs were created around the metro. So you have again, using Cincinnati, we have this metro, but then we have all these suburban bands where as they got further and further out from the city center and they become a little more rural, and then those rural areas get developed, and then they become a little more rural, and they get right. It's this kind of cycle of kind of growing in this huge circle around the city
Yeah.
where those neighborhoods, those suburbs, really kill it on the development because one, they have the land. Two, they have 100 years of progress of technology and zoning and building code. And so like in Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio, let's say, not even Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio, we have a lot of these like really planned development neighborhoods where it's like you can literally look on a map and it's like, oh, this is brilliant, right? All the streets are perfectly laid out. You have these city centers, you have these parks. And it's like when you get into the metro areas, it's a lot more hodgepodge. You have, 100 years of mishaps of design and there wasn't really planning, right? Like 100 and 150 years ago. So with all that said, my question is, if I put you in charge of the world, how do you fix that? How do you revive these downtown metros? And there's a lot of problems. I mean, we could talk about the crime and we could talk about low income and there's a lot of political elements to this. But
Mhm.
to me, the bigger point is how do we redevelop these metros and keep them alive for the next 100 years? Because Cincinnati is like many other major metros, certainly in the Midwest, are really seeing these major problems.
Ooh, that's a big loaded question.
Yeah, I
But
know.
I love it the fact that if you're looking at purely the core, and this happens when we were in Peoria doing the old warehouse district. So we had Johnny Walker's started down there, and they all big vacant warehouses, right? They were
Hmm.
just sitting there mothballing basically. The city came in and said, "Hey, we want to start investing." So same thing that happened with like Chicago's West Loop, right? The first thing they did is the city came in and made the investment. So it starts to
Mm.
give people a sense of this is a safe place, this is transforming, and perception's reality. So to me, the first thing we got to look at is what area do we want to activate? What's going to be that heartbeat, that catalyst in the area? And then look at the ripple effect around it. And that's where we start looking at those incentive zones. So multiple
Mm.
examples of how we started activating downtowns where we did our bakery project that I speak about a lot. when we wanted to do that project, we wanted more than just that building. So we said, you have to create a TIF district like this area. You have to create a business development district this area, service area, this area. And we caught a lot of slack for that because like, we don't need this. We don't need this. Well, fast forward.
Who are you getting pushback from?
The village, the council, and again, we always often forget a
So
lot
local
of times
government.
the local government is somebody who's our neighbor running because they want a certain, sidewalks here or these programs. They're not very sophisticated developers normally. So
Yeah.
part of what we have to do is teach them why this works. Why do we want to do this? And now we've done so many developments in communities and have that ripple effect that we have the data to show because, the business development district we created for the bakery in COVID, sorry, that was enabling the community, the village to come and say, hey, tenants, we can give you a grant to help pay your mortgage. Hey, building owners, we can give you a grant to help pay, the tenant to pay their rent, the building owner to pay their mortgage. But they were able to give those funds out because they had them and they had them for that specific purpose to enhance it. And so they don't see what the good that it can do and that ripple effect. So it gives those communities more opportunities and more tools to attract development, to really promote the small business. But a lot of times they don't have the staff and the team to teach how to do it. So I would look at the first thing if I was running the world, Joe, as you said, like look at those incentive areas. What do we really want to lean all in? And like, this is where we're going to focus because in real estate, when you look at base employment, if you can hit that base employment, then everything ripples down from that in your community. You have the trailing spouse, you have the kids, you have the retail, like all that comes trailing. So your EDCs normally focus on the base, but you also need that experience and that community to attract the companies for their workforce for that base. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg, but that's where I would lean in. And then I would start to engage with people who have buildings because the biggest thing I see, and we ran into this a lot when we're doing the warehouse district, is some guy who bought this building, and everybody listening is going to laugh because they're like, I know that's Joe, that's Bob, right? It's not Joe, you, but say like, I bought this warehouse for $20,000
right
3 to 5 years ago, and now you want 2 million, and you've done nothing to it, right? Well, then you start to look at how do we have the incentives pay them back in a different way, or you skip them, right? And so those are the ways that you kind of get everybody on board in doing that. But having those tools in your toolbox is really that first step, and then defining that target area. Because what I see often is if you don't define that target area, you can go into an area, drop 10, $20 million. And if you don't have any adjacency, nobody's going to see it. You have to have adjacency because again, perception's reality. People got to see it.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's, and it's so frustrating. I've been in real estate now full time for, 8-9 years, and I have always wanted to get into development. And as I've grown in confidence, obviously now I feel like I'm at the point where I'm ready to start doing these larger deals into the development side. But it's difficult because just because you want to do these deals somewhere doesn't mean the local jurisdiction is going to be supportive. And it sounds crazy, to me, to our listeners who are hearing this. It's like, well, why would they not want to see these blighted buildings be redeveloped? I can't tell you why, but I will say that I've seen firsthand a lot of jurisdictions are like, yeah, we're just not really interested in offering incentives. We're not really interested in supporting these types of projects. Maybe they've been burnt by developers in the past, so some of those officials within the government are just kind of anti-development or anti-developer almost. I've heard stories like that where developers will come in, they talk a big game, and then they don't follow through with anything. And I think sometimes the governments get jaded. And obviously that's a two-way street. A lot of times governments will make a lot of promises and not follow through, and then developers get jaded. But it just blows my mind when it's like you can lay out all the logic in the world to these decision makers within these local governments, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to care or have any interest. And one thing I have to constantly, I'll constantly have to remind my business partner of this. It's like I was a cop, so I was a government employee for 10 years, and what I learned working in government is that almost every role in government is not your income is not tied to an outcome, right? So like when you look at the corporate world, you look at in real estate, you look at sales, it's very simple to say, oh, if I do this, I'm going to make this, or if I can accomplish this, I'm going to get this. That's not how government works. If you're on a city council, if you're a mayor, if you're a city manager, if you're a police chief, whatever it is, like very rarely is performance tied to income, and therefore there is a lack of incentive from within the government. And I think a lot of people don't really understand that, especially if they come from the private sector.
Yeah, and I would say two scars, two like horror stories pop up when you're saying that is, when you talk about creating a TIF. So for like I mentioned the bakery project, we had to create all those, right? So there's public meetings, there's timeframes, and again, public doesn't understand these more complex structures. What they understand
Yeah.
is like you're not giving money to the schools, you're not giving money to this. So you have to do a good job.
Schools is a whole nother. We could have a whole nother conversation on the schools.
Yes,
Yeah.
we can do that. And so there was to the other context of that was when we were asking for that, what you just said had happened a year and a half prior is they created a TIF district across the street for a developer that wanted to do something. And so I seek to understand like what was the development, what were you doing? I looked at the floor plan, and this is again growing up in the business. I'm like, well, that's never going to cash flow. And they're like, what? You don't even know the numbers. I'm like, yeah, that's not cash flowing. Like I'm just telling you, like that's not going to work. And they're like, yeah, the project never went through. So then I had a whole city council and mayor that was jaded. And so, but they're telling me everything's on the table, Katie, get this business in here. And I'm like, okay, this is what I need. Boom, boom, boom. And literally the mayor very colorfully told me to, F off, that this is never going to get passed right before we went to council meeting. I'm like, I got to try. Like and we passed unanimously.
Wow.
Because we were able to tell that story along the way of like, this is how we're different, right? This is what you have as a scar. And the other, when you do go into the public entities, we are doing a 2-block revitalization where we took these old rundown houses, the foundation, I mean, they're not savable. The foundation's gone, but it used to be the bungalow houses for the factory workers. And so we want to make them now into these townhomes and brownstones. And we had public meetings telling everybody about it. We had a TIF extended to make it work. And at the first public meeting, all of a sudden we had people with pitchforks with like eminent domain and this. I'm like, whoa, this is not even the project. Like, what? So sometimes you have somebody in the community that's a loud voice that doesn't know what they're talking about. We often have those, or it's a keyboard warrior, right? That spreads stuff. And that's why it's really great as a developer to get ahead of what's your story, get it out there first. This is what we're doing. That project was hard because we were accumulating houses on a 2-block and we didn't want to go public yet because obviously those houses would go up 3 to 4 times the price, but we were kind of at a rock and a hard place. But yeah, sometimes they just don't understand or they have different scars. So you got to understand that and have that context.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And, that's definitely been, and having came from a government role, working in a local small neighborhood government, which is similar to where we're developing. I knew how political all of those things get. Everybody's got those motivations, and for anyone listening to this who might say, this sounds kind of bizarre, why would these governments not want to see these things change? The one thing I want people to understand is that what I've found often in small government, it's very similar to an HOA. And what I mean by that, for anyone who's dealt with an HOA, it's almost always a nightmare. And here's why. You have these people who get elected or appointed to these positions. And in often cases, this is the only aspect of their life where they have any power, and that's really important to understand from like a psychology element, because when someone, if the rest of their life, they feel like they're out of control, but there's this one spot where they get to be, and they have a lot of power, they have a lot of leverage, and they get to be in control. You have to understand how to work with people when they're in that mindset, because it's very different. When someone gets to make decisions all day long, and they feel like they're in control of their life all day long in a lot of aspects, then they may not have that ego that goes with that. But when someone has one very specific situation where they're in control, there's a very specific way you have to work with people like that, because it's a lot of ego, it's a lot of personalities, it's making them feel empowered and important, and feeling respected and valued. And a lot of that's kind of how you play the politics of this so far in my experience, anyway.
Absolutely. And that's a way to hit the nail on the head, to be honest, because you do have a lot of people, especially sitting on council in smaller communities that are exactly what you just said. I can't say it better. And knowing what they're really passionate about in their community and then seeking to educate them. So I always seek to come from contribution first
Mm,
to be like, do you understand this, what this is going to do? And like a lot of times it's a lot of meeting with them one-on-one to understand what they
yeah.
want to do and where they're passionate and make sure that they can ask questions to you one-on-one so they don't seem stupid in front of their peers. And then when they go to those, sitting in the council and around the horseshoe, they're equipped, right? They know what's going on. They feel they have that confidence. So you almost enable them to come to that with the authority, the power, the insight. And a lot of times I will recommend to people, start networking with your council people before you have an ask, right? Like
Mm,
anytime somebody gets nominated or voted in, to a council position or a zoning board position, I really try and have coffee with them and say, this is what we're working on. Let us know if you have any questions on, anything coming up. And a lot of times they'll reach out to us. They'll reach out to me and be like, hey, Katie, there's this thing coming up. Like, what do you know about it? What can you give me some
mm.
insight? What should I be thinking about that I'm not? And so now you're becoming an advocate and almost a consultant,
For the community.
for the
Yeah.
community. And so there's no, I mean, you're not tackling anybody, but it's like, we'll also ask them about this or ask them about that. And again, if you work collaboratively, rising tide lifts all boats. And so they want to do a good job. I mean, nobody runs for civil service to like usually tackle the community. They want to
Mm,
enhance it. You just got to figure out how do you work with them in that
yeah.
strategic manner.
And what are their motivations and what are their interests? Yeah, that's great. Great
Mhm.
advice.
Yeah.
All right, I want to spend a little bit of time on the deals you're actively working on. I know you said you're
Mhm.
you're you're doing some stuff in Texas right now, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we kind of touched on it a little bit is looking at those downtown areas and those cores and how to activate them. And where we're bringing in marketing and branding at a next level to really create those experiences, not only within our building, but the ripple from them. And then also leveraging how do we get the community back to the downtown core? So a lot of that
Mm,
is working with the municipalities that actually still want to own the buildings. And so we're like, that's great. Let's go. Let's do this. And so they're hiring us to put together the whole development and then also overseeing it, activating it, and then training their team to be able to run those assets and then take it over, which is great because then they can keep those resources and keep those opportunities for future coming in. We're also working with a lot. I mentioned warehouse. There's a lot of I would say AI database centers and different factories and different industrial spaces that those businesses are expanding. They want to take advantage of the tax credits that are coming for them, but they don't know how to structure all that. So we're working with them to create smaller industrial suites as well as the bigger buildings, and then leveraging those financial structures to make them to work
How
and
are
to
you
be.
educating yourself on that? Obviously we've this new administration. We're recording this in June of 2025. This new administration has talked a lot about trying to bring back manufacturing in the U.S., talking about incentives that they want to roll out from a federal level. But how are you specifically educating yourself on how to best utilize those potential, incentives?
Daily, to be honest, because as you mentioned with this administration, it's changing daily.
Yeah.
And so having that network, being involved in like the CDFI and different associations and staying with the pulse of the EDC and our local and state and federal legislators is being in the conversation in the room. Because a lot of times they'll get, a bill or something like that, and they'll be like, Katie, what are we missing? And I'll be reading legislation that they're going to vote on. So
Mm,
making yourself available as a subject matter expert, offering, the expertise to those legislators so that they are empowered with the
wow.
right knowledge of like, how is this going to be used? How is this backfiring? What's the negative? What's the positive? And being able to offer that insight, one helps me know what's going to floor as soon as I can, but
And
then
now you're
also
talking about this is like state level in Texas.
state and well, the multiple states that we work in, and then even federal level. Like a lot of times we
Okay.
don't get to see the full on the federal, but we'll get clips sent to us and say like, what do you think about this or what about that? and or they'll have
And what
conversations.
were those two groups you said you're a part of?
CDFI is the Community Development Financing. I want to say institute. I don't know. Sorry,
Is
I'll
that
look it
okay?
up.
And this is like a membership, or like how do
That's
you
a
join that?
membership. Yeah. So that's a lot of CDEs and CDCs. So a lot of your EDCs or your economic development councils or committees will have a membership towards CDFI. And I just said, well,
Mm,
if this is what you guys are learning, I want to be right there too. So
yeah,
there's
that's great.
actually not a lot of developers in it, which I love because when I go to those workshops and those networks, they're asking me, well, how do you think this is going to play out in the community? What should we give our developers? Like, how do we market it? So it's again, you're in the room with the people that are administering these programs that a lot of times they don't understand. So, for example, when new market tax, or sorry, not new market, opportunity zones came out, like they had a whole like 2 3 day workshop, and I was drilling a lot of the attorneys from like Hush Blackwell and the different people they had on stage because it still hadn't been voted in yet. So like that's the thing, is that those institutions are putting the education out before it's finalized to
Mm,
also get that feedback.
that's
And to
great.
be in the room for those is game changer, and you're ahead of the game, so when it comes and it's launched, you're already ready to go. Like we hosted from that session, we hosted it, we called it an OZ zone. And we did an open bar in one of our developments in an OZ zone. We invited the attorneys and other speakers and everybody in the community. It was open because we needed them to understand it to be able to get rising tide lifts all boats. So I think when you can come and come and develop your network and be in those meetings before things get finalized, it gives you that edge.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'll have to look into that myself. And
Yeah.
yeah, that sounds super interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about your education platform you built.
Yeah, so I actually I attended. Speaking of being in the room, I attended InvestorCon last year in Austin, and I got so charged from being in the room and talking about women's financial literacy and not knowing. I was like, well, I can do this, and God had been putting on my heart to teach more and to get out there and help other people. I'm like, I'm only one person, so I made a deal with him and said, if you want to do this, like you got to put people in my way to help me, my path to help me do it. And so he did, and we launched the Katie Kim educational platform, which has the Real Estate Development Academy, which is a paid program to allow people to go from like beginner or just investing to now I want to develop. How do I step into this? And we hold their
Mm,
hand through the whole program. We do a lot of coaching, a lot of one-on-one private portals. We really work. It's not fluff. I've seen so many programs that it's like, I don't even know what to do after I'm done with it. I'm like, I'm not doing that.
right.
I'm not putting my name on that. So we really dig into that. And then there's deep dive sessions. And like I said, our coaching and consulting calls every single week to help make sure we're getting out of our head, because in development game, you can get in your head pretty quick. And then we also have knowledge nuggets and money math, which are free on our platform because we want to teach people the lingo, like the terms. And a lot of times people hear a definition and somebody's using it incorrectly, and we want them to
Mm,
know how to use it. And again, the money math kind of stem from my kids saying, Mom, why do I have to ever learn this equation, right? I'm never going to use it. And I'm like, no, 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 you will use that one. Like that one, yes. This one, learn to pass the test and let's go, right? So
yeah, yeah, that's great.
um, it's a really great balance of meeting the community where they're at and really leaning into the people that need that lifeline. They're smart, they know what they're doing, but they just need that guide and that consultant.
And how can our best ever listeners find out more about that?
Yes, they can go to katiekim.com, and that has access to the academy, or they can find us on social media at the handle the Katie Kim.
Got it. Well, Katie, I really appreciate all your insights. I feel like we could probably go for another hour or two, which tells me we probably should schedule a part two of this conversation, because I know I've really enjoyed it and I've learned a lot. Yeah, thank you so much for giving us your time today. Any other final thoughts you want to leave us with?
I would say anybody that's looking to get into development or level up in their commercial real estate or investing game is take the time to educate yourself on the process. And like we've mentioned, build that network of people in the community you want to develop, but also build that network of people that are going to help you put those deals together and bring. I always say my partners, I like to bring different scars into the partnership. So you're
Yeah.
looking at things in a different way and really collaborate with a mentor for your first one. That's the biggest thing. Even myself, growing up in it, I brought mentors in. I still bring mentors in. What do you think about this? And it's a great way to learn. We often forget we went to school, we had teachers, we had coaches, and then we graduate and the world just kind of dumps us out there. Well,
Yeah.
if you want to level up, you need teachers, you need mentors. So lean into that and they'll strengthen you.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I've told this many times on the show, but I am stubborn. I find it hard to ask for help and ask for advice from people. Now, obviously, I'm fortunate as a host on the show. I get to talk to a lot of smart people such as yourself, and I get to just kind of naturally learn a lot through these conversations. But I always advocate for the best of listeners or any of my clients, like, don't be like me, because I do everything the hard way. I only learn by failing over and over and over until I get, good at things and learn from my own pain. But I would not suggest anyone take the path I've taken. So I couldn't agree more with what you're saying.
Well, and what you're saying, Joe, I was afraid to ask when I first started. And my coach said, like, what happens if, kind of the world crashes? What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to hunt down everybody who's doing what I'm doing or what I want to do and ask them. And he goes, go. And so I started
That's
asking
great.
people, we would go for walks, we'd go for coffee, I'd join them on their workouts, and we would just talk deals. And you'll find a lot of developers want to talk about their deals. They don't want you to make the same mistake they did. And so it's a lot easier, to get them to start talking and share with you than you think.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Well, Katie, thank you so much for all your time today. Looking forward to having another conversation with you in the future. But yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate it.
Best ever listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any. Thank you all for listening. Have a best ever day.